Hi students, welcome to lesson number 7, Agrarian Social Structure and Emerging Class Structure in Rural India. I would like to discuss this lesson in two parts. Now let us discuss part A. The study of agrarian social structure has been a matter of serious study in rural sociology. If we go by the dictionary meaning, agrarian pertains to land or its tenure or to a general distribution of lands and organizing or furthering agricultural interests. Agrarianism refers to a set of values which holds that agriculture is the most natural and desirable vocation and the farm the ideal place to live. Thus, an agrarian society may be accepted as any form of society, especially traditional societies, primarily based on agricultural production and associated crafts rather than industrial production. If we wish to elaborate further, we may say that an agrarian society focuses its mode of production primarily on agriculture and the cultivation of large fields. This distinguishes it from the hunter-gatherer society which produces on of its own food and the horticultural society which produces food in small gardens rather than fields. Now let us discuss about the objectives of this lesson. The main objectives of this lesson are: number 1, to discuss about the concept of agrarian social structure. Number 2, to discuss about the agrarian social structure in India. Number 3, to discuss about the changing trends in the agrarian economy and agrarian social structure during the post-independence period. What is agrarian social structure? Agrarian means anything related to land, its management or distribution. Agrarian social structure will include caste, class, land ownership and jajmani system, while agrarian class structure will include only classes. Land is the central element to the agrarian social structure in India, and caste, class and land ownership are closely linked. Dominant land owning groups are usually middle or high ranked castes, and most of the marginal farmers and landless belong to the lower caste groups. A.R. Desai and Andri Betille have contributed significantly to the understanding of agrarian social structure in India. Betille, while defining the agrarian social structure, is clearly of the view that only peasantry does not constitute it. It means something more than the study of peasant societies and cultures. Thus, all those playing a role in agrarian society form various parts of it. He further says that the study of agrarian social structure revolves around mainly two aspects. One is technological arrangements and number 2, social arrangements. While the former refers to the ecological conditions and agricultural technology, the later refers to land ownership and control, power structure, land tenure and related social dimensions. Talking about the social framework of agriculture, economic change cannot be adequately understood in isolation from the social framework within which it takes place. This is particularly true of the underdeveloped and developing countries of Asia, where economic organization has a lower degree of autonomy than in the industrial societies of the West. Thus, in South Asian societies, the economic organization is found to be more closely intermeshed with a variety of social institutions whose functions are partly economic and partly non-economic. He further emphasizes the relevance of the social framework to economic activities by elaborating that the economic activities involve the mutual interaction of individuals whose rights and obligations are socially defined. The same broad set of activities as in agriculture can be socially organized. The understanding of agrarian social structure and the social organization of agriculture, described as Social Framework of Agriculture by Andrew Bethille, is not possible without having a sound understanding of peasantry or peasant society and its various implications and dimensions in the Indian setting. Agrarian social structure. The usual and universalistic way of describing social structure has been through institution based on birth, such as family, kinship, and caste. Another way of describing it is through class. Thus, the agrarian class structure may be used to understand the power structure and class stratification in Indian rural social structure. However, both caste and class are necessary to describe the agrarian social structure in India. It also explains the power structure in rural India. In this way, when we talk of agrarian class stratification, we get a better view of rural India, which was traditionally viewed through caste stratification only. K.L. Sharma, putting the whole issue in proper perspective, makes the incisive comment by saying that caste incorporates the element of class, and class has a cultural style, that is caste. Hence, the two systems cannot be easily separated even analytically. Modern agrarian class structure. Broadly speaking, the modern agrarian class structure in India evolved during the British colonial rule. It was the outcome of the land revenue system evolved and enforced by the British rule. There were three classes. Number 1, landowners. Number 2, tenants. Number 3, agricultural laborers. Daniel Thorner, in his classical work, describes these three classes as: number 1, maliks or proprietors; number 2, kisans or working peasants; number 3, mazdoor or laborers. In vernacular language, he uses the terms malik, kisan and mazdoor for these three classes respectively. The landowners or proprietors traditionally belonged to the upper caste group. They were tax gatherers and non-cultivating owners of land. Now, let us discuss in detail with regard to these three social classes. Number 1, maliks are the rich landlords. Daniel Thorner understands that the category of proprietors or maliks refers to families whose agricultural income is derived primarily from property rights in the soil. That is to say that whatever other sources of family income may exist, such as from a profession or business, The main agricultural income is derived from a share of the produce of lands belonging to the family. Typically, this share will be realized in the form of rent. Usually, the rent will be taken in the form of money, but may be in kind or also on crop sharing basis. Instead of renting out his land, however, a proprietor may hire laborers to cultivate them for him. He may manage these hired laborers himself, or he may hire someone else as manager. He may actually go into the fields and perform some of the work alongside of his hired laborers. The main determinant should be his mode of income. If his agriculture income from that part of his holdings which he cultivates with his own hands is less than the amount that he receives from renting out the rest of his lands or having them tilled by hired laborers. Within this group or class of proprietors, it is possible to separate out two subgroups. One consists of large absentee landlords who typically have holdings in more than one village. The second consists of smaller proprietors who reside personally in the village in which they own land and usually exercise some degree of management and control over its cultivation. Most of the members of this class come from the higher castes. Then second one, kisans are working peasants. The second class, referred to as kisan or working peasants, has also a recognized property interest in the land. They may be small owners or tenants with varying degrees of security. By and large, their legal and customary rights will be somewhat inferior to these of the Malik in the same village. The chief distinguishing feature, however, is the amount of land held. In the case of the working peasant, the size of the holding is such that it supports only a single family, and then only if one or more members of the family perform the field labor. In fact, the produce from the land owned by the kisan may not even provide the entire income required by his family, but at least it provides a larger share than whatever funds he may receive from other agricultural sources, such as doing labor on other people's land. Kisan, as defined here, are those villagers who live primarily by their own labor power on their own lands. They do not employ labor except briefly in the plowing or harvest season, nor do they commonly receive rent. They come from the middle level cultivating or artisan castes, most of these being OBCs or backward castes. Then third one, mazdoor or agricultural laborers. The third agrarian class referred to as laborer or mazdoor comprise those villagers who gain their livelihood primarily from working on other people's land. Families in this class may indeed have tenancy rights in the soil or sharecropping rights. That means this class also constitute of tenants or sharecroppers, but the holdings are so small that the income from cultivating them is so less than the earnings from wage labor. Wages may be fixed or may be in the form of a crop share. In practice, the lower ranks of sharecroppers, and tenants at will are almost indistinguishable from Mazdoor, and they will tentatively be included in this category. Most of the members of this class come from the traditionally landless, deprived lower castes or scheduled castes and backward castes. As Thorner rightly points out, the maintenance of this hierarchical structure of interest in the land has required that quite a substantial proportion of the produce goes to the persons who perform no agricultural work in the form of rent. What was left to the actual cultivator is so meager that is not even sufficient to meet their family needs. Thus, the power structure in the agrarian classes is largely based on exploitation and deprivation. In his landmark work, D.N. Dhanagare says that although Thorner's categories and subcategories are nearer the realities of the Indian agrarian social structure, there is still a need to readjust or regroup these categories into a broader and more comprehensive model and redesignate them by commonly used concepts and criteria in the study of peasant societies. Dhanagare's model of agrarian class structure constitute of the following social classes. Number 1, landlords. Number 2, rich peasants. Number 3, middle peasants. Number 4, poor peasants. Number 5, landless laborers. Dhanagare further opines that the social composition of these agrarian classes in terms of specific status groups like castes, religious or ethnic groups, etc., is far too complex in different regions of India to reduce into any simplistic formula. However, for a loose and broad classification, this may hold ground. For example, landlords and rich landowners, including non-cultivating urban moneylenders and owners, belong to the upper castes such as Brahmin, Thakur or Baniya in northern India. In Andhra Pradesh, the Kamma, Reddis and Raus. In Mysore, the Okkaligas and Lingayats. The Patidars in Gujarat region, while the Kunbis, Marathas and Deshmukhs in Maharashtra could be cited as more examples of the locally dominant landowning castes. The middle and poor peasantry, mostly debt-ridden, came primarily from the traditional castes of cultivators, artisans and so on. The landless laborers belong mostly to backward castes and the scheduled castes. According to A.R. Desai, the post-independent Indian rural setup reveals the existence of 4 classes. They are: number 1, landowners, which constitute of 22%, number 2, tenants, which constitute of 27%, third, agricultural laborers, which constitute of 31%, fourth, non-agriculturists, which constitute of 20%.